Hello. So, this is the story of one of the most extraordinary fundraising campaigns I've ever been involved with, and in fact, one of the most extraordinary political campaigns I've ever had the privilege of being involved with, too. But before I get into the details of that, I just want to take you back in time a little bit and give you a little bit of background and context, specifically to 1992. This is me in the fetching black coat and snazzy haircut when I was a student activist, which I had spent several years in the early 90s being involved in. Ireland back in the early 90s was a very different place. The religious right had been on the rise for a decade, having won a referendum in 1983 to insert a constitutional ban on abortion. They then went after pretty much anyone trying to help women in crisis pregnancies. So non-directive pregnancy counselling services were closed down and prevented from referring women to the UK. Even Cosmopolitan was being censored. The back page with ads for Mary Stopes and other abortion service providers were removed from Cosmopolitan magazine before it would come into the country. It's hard to believe in this connected age we are now how it was possible to stymie information and keep people in the dark about stuff as it was back then, but it was very real and very much the case. By the late 1980s, the only people who were able to continue providing information for women in crisis pregnancies were a number of student unions, and they were doing this under pressure from anti-abortion activists and groups. But they persevered in the face of a lot of pressure. Several of my friends who were fellow student union officers at the time were threatened with jail and bankruptcy for publishing the numbers of British abortion service providers in the student handbooks. Whether it was youthful naivety or a genuine passion or a bit of both, we persevered and kept going in the face of this pressure. But these were dark days. And 1992 was in many ways both the low point but also the turning point in the abortion debate in Ireland, because this was the year that the Irish government decided to prevent a 14-year-old girl who had been raped by a neighbour from travelling to the UK for an abortion. It provoked a huge amount of outrage. Thousands of people came out to protest on the streets, and it was probably the first moment that there was a chink of light in the debate around abortion and the chance that we could begin to change things. So after many years of difficulties, 1992 saw the start of a movement to try and change things. But it was a long movement, and it wasn't until last year, 26 years later, that Ireland finally got the chance to vote on abortion and have the chance to remove it from the Constitution, remove the ban from the Constitution. So after several years of debate and political discussion, the government brought forward a referendum in 2018 to remove the ban on abortion. And both the pro-choice and anti-abortion sides began to mobilise to fight that campaign. Together for Yes was the National Civic Society movement for a yes vote in that referendum, and it began to come together in February 2018 from a number of groups that had been active on the issue in previous years. And having come together, they rapidly began to pull together a plan and reckoned that they would need to raise somewhere in the region of about €1 million to fight the campaign that was due to start later that year. This was going to be a challenge because under Irish electoral law, there's a maximum limit of €2,500 that organisations that are campaigning can accept from a single individual. So big gifts were out. This was going to have to be a campaign that mobilised lots of people to give lots of small gifts to try and change the Constitution. However, there was a problem here in that Together for Yes, being a new organisation, didn't have a database, didn't have huge numbers of people already available to support them. So this was going to require reaching out and mobilising large numbers of people to try and make something happen. The referendum was called in late March, and almost immediately the other side had their posters and their campaign up. And pretty much from the off, every lamppost in the country seemed to be covered in posters calling for a no vote, some of them both misleading and quite offensive. And the public reacted and reacted quite badly to that. But Together for Yes were still pulling together their campaign. They were still developing their messaging, and they also knew that this was going to be a long campaign. The campaign was due to last 2 months, so they didn't want to fire off too early in this. However, there was a clear demand from across the country to get yes posters up to provide a bit of balance and counterpoint to the no posters that were everywhere. And this fed into the fundraising strategy quite nicely, in that crowdfunding had been identified early on as a key part of the campaign. So, for something like a crowdfund, a strong, tangible ask obviously is hugely helpful. And a poster is nice in that regard, that you can hang the hook of €10 to print, put up, and take down a poster, and it gave us a very strong, tangible hook for the fundraising. So, as the demand for posters mounted around the country, Together for Yes began to pull together the crowdfund campaign, which was going to play a key part in their fundraising strategy. But one of the key problems in a crowdfunding campaign, particularly in a political context, is how much to ask for. And the target is crucial here, because it has not just fundraising impacts, but also potentially political impacts. If you aim too high and you don't meet your target, then the impact on the morale of the campaign, but also on the political debate, is going to be pretty negative. If you aim too low, it can show a sense of lack of ambition or fail to motivate the base. So getting the right amount was absolutely crucial, not just in terms of fundraising, but in terms of the politics and the debate itself. Luckily, there was a bit of precedent here, in that 3 years earlier we had a referendum to introduce marriage equality in the country, and they had used crowdfunding quite successfully. So the Yes campaign there had run a crowdfund which raised €107,000. So this seemed like a good place to start in terms of trying to judge how much to ask for. However, abortion is a significantly more controversial issue than marriage equality, and we felt that 100,000 might be a little bit high. And also, the campaign around marriage equality had focused a lot on people sharing their own stories and their own histories with people, whereas we felt that in the debate around abortion, this may not be happening to the same extent. So we were erring a little bit on the side of caution, and provisionally we thought maybe a €50,000 public target with €100,000 as a backup if we met it might be a safe place to go. However, just to be sure, we wanted to make sure that we had some data to back that up. So looking at the kind of spontaneous, organic gifts that were coming in to the campaign at that time, that gave us a little bit more confidence. But just to be sure, in the weekend before the campaign was due to launch, we decided to run some Facebook ads to try and test the waters. They went well. Results were positive, and we felt confident enough to go with a €50,000 target publicly, in the hope that would be met easily, and all going well, we'd be able to push on towards the €100,000, which would make a dent in the €1 million target that we were hoping to raise. So the campaign launched in early April of 2018. And it started on a Tuesday morning with an email blast, and followed very quickly by a social media blast. At this stage, the email list had been built up to about 10,000 people, so there was a reasonably decent number there, and we were able to go out on social media as well. Obviously, there's a couple of key things to watch out for in a crowdfunding campaign, and momentum is absolutely essential at the start of a crowdfunding campaign if you're going to show that you're moving towards target. So key donors, people who had committed to support the campaign, and people we knew who we were close to who would row in behind it, were lined up and pre-briefed that the campaign would be launching at 8:30 on the Tuesday morning, and they received advance warning and were primed to give, so that we saw an early burst of giving early that day. And then the email, which you can see there, went out to the list, followed very closely by a social media blast across the different platforms of Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, all pushing people to go to the crowdfunding site and make a gift to put up a poster with the hook of one poster costing €10. And as you can see from the email there, we were hanging that on around €50 with the aim of getting 5,000 posters up around the country costing €50,000. Just a little bit about the email, because one of the great things about this campaign was how committed Together for Yes were to testing well across their digital activity. And as you can see on this, we tested two versions of the email. One which was, can you donate what you can? And one which was, can you donate €50 right now? And interestingly, the fundraising conventional wisdom was turned a little bit on its head here, in that the open, unspecific ask got not just a better response rate, but a better average gift than the can you donate €50 right now ask. Now, whether that was because of the particular price point we picked there or some other reason, I don't know, but it definitely shows the importance of testing, and sometimes testing things that you think are always going to work out one way, that they can in fact work out the other way. Testing was a great part of the campaign, and you can see it in some of the other emails that they used. For instance, here in terms of testing the buttons and the shape of the buttons, the early emails from Together for Yes in the campaign use pretty standard looking square rectangular buttons with just the text, which you can see on the left of the screen there. But as testing went on through the campaign, we realized that actually larger circular visual buttons, such as the one on the right, actually were getting a much better click-through rate, and that's what was then applied going forward. And you can actually see the difference there in the results. So the campaign launched at 8:30 on Tuesday morning, and we all sat around anxiously waiting to see where the figures were going. And what happened was quite extraordinary. By 9:50, so an hour and 20 minutes into the campaign, we had pretty much reached our public target of €50,000. This was flying already. We immediately popped up the increased target of €100,000, and by 12 o'clock, 3.5 hours after we launched, we had beaten that target as well. Before lunchtime was finished, we were up to €150,000, and at this stage we were just wondering what was going to happen. Not only were the numbers going through the roof, but we were getting to the stage where we were going to have almost too many posters. That afternoon, we were debating amongst ourselves whether people would continue to give and continue to pay for posters after having raised so much. But we needn't have doubted it, because by close of business that day, we were already up to €200,000, 4 times the total target we'd launched with that morning. And by 10:20 that evening, we had raised nearly €300,000. It was without doubt the most extraordinary day of my fundraising career, as the numbers went up and the figures kept going and going and going. When you look at the total figures in context there, €300,000 on the first day, €20,000 an hour, €326 per minute, and €5 per second, it's pretty extraordinary. The campaign ran for a further week and raised a total of almost €600,000. And I think it's important to look at these figures in context, because Ireland is a very small country. We've 4.5 million people here. It's about the size of Manchester in the UK. So if you were to compare those sort of figures to somewhere like the UK, for instance, a €600,000 campaign would be like raising 10 million in the UK, or a country of that size. So all in all, these figures were pretty extraordinary. Something that absolutely blew people away. I think there's a couple of key things that are worth looking at here in terms of the learning from this campaign and how they can apply to other digital campaigns and other political and fundraising campaigns. First one is around the speed of action, and I think I'd encourage anyone who hasn't been involved in a fast-moving political campaign, whether it's for an election or a referendum or anything else, to volunteer and get involved, because the pace and the speed and the way of working is so different to more established, structured organisations, and it makes you think and act in a different way. And one of the things with Together for Yes was because the stakes were so high, because this was potentially a once in a lifetime opportunity to overturn the ban on abortion, that decision making had to be quick because there was so much to do. So the senior team of 3 directors who ran the campaign were able to make decisions and also set clear parameters and principles for action. So when things needed to be decided, they were decided fast. There was no delay. I'm just going to take you through the decision making process, just on that comes from the email thread when I look back on it, of those days after the first day of the campaign. Because I think it's really interesting to see how it evolved and how the thoughts changed and the moods changed and how decisions got signed off. So if we go back to the first evening of the campaign, we've just raised €300,000, 6 times what we had set out to raise that morning. And we're all a little bit shell-shocked and trying to figure out what to do next. So I got an email from Denise, who is the head of fundraising for Together for Yes, and she said, should we keep it going or change ask or close off? That's at 9:45 on Tuesday night. We had a discussion. We strongly recommended keeping it going and continuing to ask for money, because clearly there was the appetite to support this campaign. So by 10:08, we had updated the site to say we are raising €400,000 to continue to put up posters across the country with additional advertising in other key outlets for a positive outcome on the 25th of May. If we raise more than is needed for posters, your donations will go towards other ways to fight for a yes vote. So this was a holding position, because quite clearly we were in a situation where we were at risk of getting stuck in a restricted ask for posters that we didn't necessarily need. So we needed to widen out the ask a little bit while we decided what we needed to do. And then we changed, realised that the headline on the campaign needed to change as well. So instead of posters for yes, it became posters and advertising for yes by 11:07 that evening. And then by 11:02 that night, the social media team had been notified of changes, and we continued to discuss what the money would be used for, because the first question was, will we keep going? But then is, what else do we need money for that we can ask people to contribute to a crowdfund for? As it happened, the next morning there was a fundraising strategy group meeting, and we met at 8:30 a.m. to look at it. And 41 minutes later, we had agreed on new targets and asks. So we decided that once the crowdfund reached €350,000, it was just over 300,000 at this point, we'd increase the goal to €500,000 and switch the ask to a national leaflet drop, so that we would be asking people to fund leaflets to go to every home in the country advocating for a yes vote. And by 10:10, we got an email from Cara, who was coordinating this, briefing the action points to the wider team. So you can see all of the people were copied in, briefed on what needed to be done, and we were moving very fast at this stage, because we were counting down against the crowdfund and needed to get all this done before the crowdfund reached €350,000. By 10:30, we had the new graphic for the website ready, with a leaflet drop to homes all over the country. By 10:46, we had copy drafted for the email and the video to accompany it. And by 12 o'clock, the copy was signed off with precisely 0 changes. So anyone who's tried to develop copy for any sort of campaign will be pretty impressed with that, I'm sure. By 12:10, we were at the point where we were getting an email saying everything lined up now to make that announcement at €350,000, video nearly ready, social and graphics all ready. We've got 2 targeted emails ready. And at that point, we had some more last-minute wobbles. So, we got another email from Denise saying, slowing down the site, so wondering here if we should take a review again at €350,000. That took about 10 minutes to resolve, and we decided, okay, let's stick with the plan. We'll keep going. And as we went into lunchtime, we decided to make the target a final target, so that people knew that this was the last ask we were going to go with. By 12:30, we'd updated the email copy again, and by 1:15, the test emails were sent and final approval was sought. And that came through in less than half an hour, and at 1:15, we were 8,000 short of the 350,000 target or figure where we were going to switch to the higher ask. And by 3 o'clock, that happened. So you can see there the email that came in. Thanks all, social done, emails done, new video out and being worked into Facebook ad. Now we wait for a bit. Great team effort. Well done everyone. Incredible stuff. And it was pretty extraordinary to see that sort of decision-making process live and in action. And I think, a reminder that sometimes we need to move fast when we want these things to go according to plan. Another thing that I think is important to remember is that this all starts with a community. There's a adage that the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, and in some ways the best time to plan a crowdfunder is 10 years ago as well, because you can't just start a crowdfunder without a community. And I think it's important to see that the community is built and tended and looked after and engaged with before you jump into it. It's not the case that you can simply switch something like this on and expect to raise a ton of money. And in this case, over the previous 5 or 6 years, abortion activists in Ireland had been slowly and consistently building a community, particularly a community online of like-minded people who were advocating and campaigning for a referendum and looking to get things changed. And that community had been built up and had been engaged with then by not just Together for Yes, but the other organisations that were involved, and groups like the Abortion Rights Campaign and the Repeal the Eighth Amendment campaign, who were able to tap into this community and inspire them once the crowdfunder launched. So having that group of people there already prepped and ready to go was hugely important. And of course, it's equally important to make sure that you respect that community and maintain them and feed back and thank them. And I think the social media team and Together for Yes did a great job of consistently feeding back how the crowdfund was doing, the targets being met, really positive, upbeat messages, thanking them and showing them the difference they were making in terms of the campaign and the fundraising. Something else I think that's important for a crowdfund like this, particularly in the political space, is that it's good to have an enemy. This is one of the spokespersons for the No campaign, John McGurk. And John was a great enemy in lots of ways, because John inspired lots of yes voters to not just get active and get angry, but also to contribute. When the crowdfund launched, John, who had quite a strong social media presence himself, tried to highlight the fact that one of the donors to the crowdfund seemed to be from outside of Ireland, and under our electoral law, you can only take gifts, donations to a political campaign like this from Irish residents or Irish citizens. So a woman who seemed to be based in Austria with a Swedish-sounding name, he suggested wasn't entitled to make a donation and that this was a problem. It turned out she was indeed based in Austria, but she was born in Ireland and was an Irish citizen, and was perfectly entitled to make the gift. And she called John out online as well. But John's campaigning and John's comments led lots of people to make gifts specifically in response to that, and in some cases in honour of that. And I think having that opposition figure, having someone who you can mobilise your supporters around, whether that's a person or an organisation or something else, but someone for people to get angry about, I think, and get passionate about, really can fire up a base and get people giving large gifts and large numbers of gifts. And you can see there some of the response online to John. But I think another key thing about this was that it wasn't really about the posters. And this, I think, is a crucial learning point in this campaign. While the hook for what we were asking for, saying, will you give €10 or a multiple of €10 to put up a poster, while that was the entry point and the tangible, superficial hook we were looking at, what happened really wasn't about that. The picture you can see there is a mural of Savita Halpanavar, who died from sepsis during pregnancy, having been refused an abortion about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was her death that really catalysed the most recent wave of pro-choice campaigners in Ireland and led to the movement for the referendum in 2018. And that picture there is of the mural of Savita, which was painted in Dublin. And as polling day came close, supporters and activists were sticking messages up beside the mural and leaving flowers in memory of Savita. And it was quite extraordinary and quite moving to watch that happen. And I think when you look at the crowdfund, you realise just how emotional this was, rather than being something that was transactional about posters. Because when people were invited to make a gift, they were also invited to leave a comment, which people were using to talk about why they gave or shared their own experiences. And that in itself became an incredibly powerful thing, because not only were people leaving their messages on the website, but other people were reading them, and then people were sharing them on social media. And it quite clearly became a absolute wave and outpouring of emotion as people responded to 35 plus years of oppression and discrimination, and dealing with the rage and the hurt and the trauma of having had no access to abortion services, and for people who had to travel to Britain or deal with fatal fetal abnormalities or face incredibly hard decisions about their pregnancies. This became an incredibly transformative moment as people simply shared and reshared the messages that were coming from people. And you can see that the sort of things they were saying were incredibly powerful and incredibly inspiring. And it was this, as much as anything else, that really inspired the base and the activists and supporters, and drove them onwards in terms of the campaign. I think coming into the campaign, I was always confident that we had a great shot at winning that referendum last May. But I think it was, only on the day of the crowdfund, as we saw not just the numbers of gifts go through the roof, but the sharing of stories and experiences and solidarity across social media and across the internet, that I realised that we were going to definitely win it. And when polling day rolled around last May, we saw an incredible moment where a landslide voted to overturn our 35-year-old ban on abortion, way beyond, I think, anything any of us could have imagined or hoped for leading up to it. And I think seeing how a crowdfunding campaign had formed such a key part of that, and had both raised crucial funds for the campaign, but also mobilised and motivated and inspired supporters, was really incredible. So I hope you've found this useful. This is, I suppose, one aspect of something I'm going to be speaking at IFC as well. So if you're going to IFC, maybe I'll see you there. Myself and Alva Smith, one of the co-directors of the campaign, will be talking about the campaign more broadly and how it happened. So thank you very much.